"Pretend to be my wife or they'll kill me," the lonely farmer said to the young widow. Maria walked slowly along the dusty path that led to her small farm. The sun had started to sink behind the hills, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. Her hands were rough and worn from endless work, her body tired from bending over the soil all day. After losing her husband 2 years ago, life had become a quiet struggle, and every day felt heavier than the last. She had to work the land, care for her 2 children, and support her elderly father-in-law. Some days, she felt as if the world had forgotten her completely. She paused for a moment, looking at the fields she had planted. The wheat swayed gently in the wind, but even that small comfort felt distant. Maria loved her children dearly, but she knew that they were growing up in a world that could be cruel and unfair. She often stayed awake at night, listening to the wind and thinking about how to make life a little better for them. She knew she had to be strong, but sometimes the loneliness and fear pressed down on her like a heavy stone. As she reached her farmhouse, Maria noticed movement from the corner of her eye. A man was walking toward her slowly. He seemed nervous, and there was a strange tension in his shoulders. Maria instinctively took a step back. She did not know this man, and strangers did not come to her home often. He was tall, thin, and his clothes looked worn from long days in the fields. There was something in his eyes that told her he had a story to share, but also that he was afraid. "Good evening," he said quietly, his voice shaky. I need your help," Maria frowned. "Who are you?" she asked, her hands tightening around the basket of vegetables she had just gathered. "What do you want?" "My name is Thomas," he said, glancing around as if expecting someone to be watching. I don't know where else to go. I heard about you. People say you are strong, brave, and wise. Please, I need you to help me. My life depends on it." Maria studied him carefully. His face was pale and his eyes were filled with worry. She had never seen a man so clearly afraid of something she could not see. She wanted to ask more questions, but something in the way he spoke made her pause. It was not arrogance or greed that drove him. It was desperation. "I don't know if I can help you," Maria said cautiously. "You are a stranger and I am already struggling to survive. What could you possibly want from me?" Thomas swallowed hard. "Please, you must trust me. I have no one else. There are men, bad men, who want to take my land. They will not leave me alive unless I am married. They will kill me if I do not have a wife to stand with me." Maria felt a shiver run down her spine. She had heard stories of people being attacked and losing everything, but she never imagined she would meet someone in such danger. "Married?" she asked slowly. "You want me to pretend to be your wife?" Thomas nodded quickly, relief and fear mixing in his eyes. "Yes. Just for appearances. If you agree to pretend to be my wife, they will leave me alone. I promise I will not ask anything else. Please, I have no one. I am alone and afraid." Maria's mind raced. She thought of her children, her father-in-law, and the quiet life she had been trying to maintain. She also thought of the danger Thomas described. Pretending to be someone's wife could bring trouble, but refusing might mean leaving a man to die. She had faced hardship before, but never like this. She did not know if she had the courage for such a risk. I don't know," she said honestly. "This is dangerous. What if they find out it is not real? What if they come here?" Thomas lowered his head, almost in shame. "I will protect you as best as I can," he said softly. "I only ask you to help me for a little while. I do not want to harm you. I only want to survive just for a short time. After that, I will find another way. Please, I beg you." Maria looked at him. She saw the fear in his eyes, the way his hands trembled, the way he seemed smaller than the world around him. Something inside her softened. She thought of her own life, of how lonely and hard it had been, and for a moment she realized she understood what it meant to be truly afraid. Perhaps, in helping him, she could also find a reason to feel useful again, to face her own fears. "Very well," she said finally, her voice calm but firm. "I will pretend to be your wife, but you must promise me that you will not let this put us in greater danger. We must be careful. We cannot let anyone know the truth. Do you understand?" Thomas's eyes widened and he nodded eagerly. "Yes, thank you. I cannot tell you how much this means to me. I promise I will do everything to keep you safe. I am grateful, more than I can say." Maria nodded, feeling a strange mix of fear and resolve. She could not imagine how this would work, but she knew that for now, it was the only way to help this man and perhaps protect him from the danger he described. She also knew that her life, though hard, had prepared her for challenges. She had learned to be brave when it mattered most. That evening, Maria packed a small bag with her children's clothes, some food, and a few personal items. She kissed her children softly, telling them she would return soon. "Be good for your father-in-law," she said gently. "I will be back before long." She could see the worry in their eyes, but she forced a smile, hiding the uncertainty she felt in her own heart. Thomas met her at the edge of his farmhouse, looking nervous but relieved. "Thank you," he said again. I cannot say enough." Maria followed him inside. The farmhouse was small and simple. There was little furniture and the walls were plain, but it had a warmth that came from care and effort. She noticed the small garden outside, well tended despite its size, and realized that Thomas was a man who cared deeply for his land, even in fear. As they sat down, Maria tried to imagine how this arrangement would work. She would have to pretend to be his wife in public, interact with neighbors, and remain calm under pressure. She would have to act as though she belonged here, though everything in her life had taught her independence and caution. "Do you have a plan?" she asked softly. Thomas shook his head. "No, I have tried to stay away from them, but they are patient and cruel. I only know that if someone sees me alone, they will come for me. You being here, standing as my wife, might make them hesitate. It is the only thing I can think of." Maria nodded slowly. "We will have to be careful then. Every day, every movement. We cannot let them see fear. We must appear normal. Can you do that?" He nodded again, more determined this time. "I will try. I will do anything to survive." For the first time since he arrived, there was a small light of hope between them. They began to make plans, discussing what they would say to neighbors and how to explain their sudden marriage. Maria found herself thinking beyond the fear, imagining ways to make the pretense believable. She realized that this challenge might also give her strength she did not know she had. That night, as Maria lay in the small bedroom provided for her, she could hear Thomas moving quietly in the next room. The sounds were strange and unfamiliar, yet they brought a sense of life and presence. She thought of her children, of the farm she had left behind, and of the man who had placed his trust in her. Fear mixed with a strange sense of purpose, and she realized that courage often came not from being fearless, but from acting despite fear. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the faint scent of the wheat fields. Maria closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Tomorrow would be the beginning of something uncertain, something dangerous, and yet perhaps something meaningful. She did not know what the future held, but she knew that for now, she had made a choice to protect, to help, and to stand against the darkness that threatened a lonely farmer's life. And so, the quiet farmhouse held two people brought together by fear and necessity, each stepping into a world of uncertainty, yet finding a small spark of connection. Maria did not yet know how the days ahead would unfold, but the decision to help Thomas had already changed something inside her. She had chosen courage. She had chosen compassion. And in that choice, the first threads of an unexpected bond began to form. The next morning, Maria woke to the soft light of dawn filtering through the small window of Thomas's farmhouse. She could hear the distant crowing of a rooster and the gentle rustle of the wind across the wheat fields. Everything seemed quiet, almost peaceful, but she knew that danger could be near. She took a deep breath and reminded herself why she had come, to protect a man's life, even if it meant stepping into uncertainty. Thomas was already up, moving carefully around the kitchen. He avoided making too much noise, as if he feared every sound might attract unwanted attention. Seeing him in this way, Maria felt a mix of pity and admiration. He was clearly scared, but he had not let fear stop him from tending to the small tasks of daily life. She realized that courage sometimes showed itself in quiet, steady acts, not in loud gestures. "Good morning," Maria said softly, not wanting to startle him. Thomas looked up and gave a small, nervous smile. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" "I did enough," she replied. "We need to plan the day carefully. If anyone comes by, we must appear as a normal couple. We cannot let them see fear." Thomas nodded. "I understand. I will follow your lead." His voice was uncertain, but there was a flicker of trust in his eyes. They began the day by checking the farmhouse and surrounding fields. Maria noticed small details: a broken fence that needed repair, a well that had to be cleaned, and a few animals that required attention. Each task was small, but each carried significance. Keeping the farm in order meant they could appear normal to outsiders and maintain the illusion that life went on as usual. As they worked, Maria noticed that Thomas had a gentle, thoughtful side. He spoke little, but when he did, it was with care and honesty. He asked about her life, her children, and her late husband, not out of idle curiosity, but to understand her better. Maria found herself listening, surprised at how comforting it was to speak with someone who truly wanted to know her thoughts and feelings. By midday, the sun climbed high, and the heat pressed down on the small farm. They paused under the shade of an old oak tree, sitting together but still keeping a careful distance. Maria shared some bread she had brought from her home, and Thomas offered a small portion of vegetables he had grown. It was a simple meal, but in the quiet, there was an unspoken understanding between them. They were two people who had been alone in the world, finding in each other a fragile connection. "Why do you think they want your land so badly?" Maria asked gently, breaking the silence. Thomas sighed. "It is fertile and valuable. Some people think I am weak because I am alone. They believe they can take it easily, but if it appears I am married, that I have someone to protect me, they hesitate. That is why I needed you." Maria felt a pang of sympathy. She could see the weight of fear that he carried every day, and it made her realize that courage was not the absence of fear but the willingness to act despite it. "Then we must be careful," she said. "Every neighbor, every visitor, we must show them we are together and strong. We cannot show doubt or weakness." The rest of the afternoon was spent preparing for the possibility of visitors. Maria and Thomas practiced small gestures, walking together, speaking as a couple, and sharing meals openly. At first, it felt awkward. Maria had never lived with a man she was not married to, and Thomas had never had someone to share his home with in this way. But slowly, the gestures became natural. They learned to laugh quietly at their mistakes and support each other in small ways, like carrying buckets of water or repairing fences together. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Maria stood by the window, looking out at the fields. She thought of her children and wondered what they would think if they could see her now. She missed them dearly, but she also understood the importance of what she was doing. By helping Thomas, she was not only protecting him but also ensuring that she could return to her children safely. The thought gave her strength. Later, Thomas prepared a small dinner, and they sat together at the simple wooden table. Maria noticed that he moved with more confidence than he had that morning, though a quiet tension still lingered in his eyes. They spoke little during the meal, sharing food and warmth. It was a fragile sense of normalcy, but it mattered. In that quiet room, the pretense of marriage began to feel less like an act and more like a partnership. After dinner, Maria suggested they take a walk around the farm to make sure everything was secure. The air was cool now, and the world seemed calmer than it had in the heat of the day. As they walked, Thomas pointed out small details, places where the fence needed repair, areas where the crops were struggling, and corners of the land that required attention. Maria offered suggestions and helped him plan improvements. She realized that even in fear, people could find ways to grow and improve their lives. During the walk, they came across a small stream that ran along the edge of the property. The water was clear and cool, and for a moment the tension of the day seemed to fade. Maria sat on a rock by the stream, dipping her hand into the water. Thomas sat beside her, not touching but close enough to share the quiet moment. "It is peaceful here," Maria said softly. "I did not think I would find peace in a place like this." Thomas nodded. "Sometimes it is the quiet places that remind us there is hope. Even in danger, even in fear, life goes on." Maria smiled faintly. "Yes, life goes on." As night fell, they returned to the farmhouse. The shadows seemed longer, and the quiet outside carried a strange sense of anticipation. They lit a small lamp and sat together, planning the next day and reviewing what they would say if anyone came by. Maria felt a sense of purpose she had not felt in a long time. She was no longer just a widow struggling to survive. She was someone who could make a difference, even if it was for one man's life. Thomas glanced at her, and for the first time his eyes carried something more than fear, gratitude, respect, and a quiet admiration. Maria noticed it, though she did not speak of it. Their bond was growing, slowly and naturally, built on trust and the shared experience of facing danger together. Days passed in a similar rhythm. Maria and Thomas worked side by side, tending to the farm, repairing fences, and preparing for any visitors who might arrive. Each day brought small challenges, but also small victories. The neighbors began to notice the couple living together and accepted their presence without suspicion, perhaps assuming the young widow had found a new companion after her loss. Maria found herself growing more confident. She learned the rhythms of the farm, how to care for the animals, and how to speak with neighbors in a way that maintained their story. Thomas, in turn, began to relax slightly, finding comfort in her presence and learning to trust that she would not abandon him. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat on the porch together, watching the sun set behind the hills. The sky was a brilliant mix of oranges, pinks, and purples, and the wind carried the faint scent of wildflowers from the nearby fields. Maria felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time since her husband's death, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she was not completely alone. Thomas broke the silence. "Maria, I do not know how to thank you. I feel safer because you are here. I do not know what I would have done without you." Maria looked at him, surprised by the raw honesty in his voice. "You do not need to thank me. We are protecting each other. That is enough." He nodded, but she could see the relief in his eyes. They had faced fear together, and in doing so, had created a fragile, yet meaningful connection. As night settled over the farm, Maria went to bed with a sense of quiet determination. She knew that challenges still lay ahead, that the men who threatened Thomas could return at any time. But for now, she had found a small measure of peace, a sense of purpose, and the realization that courage came in many forms. Together in that small farmhouse, two lonely people continued to navigate the delicate balance between fear and hope, pretense and reality, danger and trust. And though the days were difficult, the bond between them grew stronger, forming the foundation for the story yet to come. The days passed quietly at Thomas's farmhouse, but Maria could feel the tension in the air. Each morning she woke with a small knot of worry in her stomach. The farm was peaceful, the wheat swaying gently in the breeze, the animals grazing calmly, but the threat that Thomas had spoken of never seemed far away. She had learned to notice small signs, the sound of distant footsteps, unusual movements of neighbors, or even the silence of the wind seemed heavier when danger was near. Thomas, too, remained alert. Though he appeared more relaxed in Maria's presence, there were moments when his hands trembled as he worked, or his eyes darted to the horizon as if expecting someone to appear at any moment. Maria understood. She had seen fear before, but this was different. This fear was quiet, constant, and heavy. It was the kind that made a person act carefully, measure every word, and hold their breath when even the wind shifted. One morning, as Maria swept the porch, she noticed something unusual. There were fresh footprints near the edge of the field, larger than Thomas's, and clearly not from any animal. She froze for a moment, heart pounding. She had learned quickly how to stay calm in such situations, but her instincts told her that this was serious. She called Thomas quietly. "Thomas," she whispered, pointing toward the tracks. "Look at these, they are recent, someone has been here." Thomas knelt down and examined the ground carefully. His face grew pale. "Yes, these are fresh. They could be them." He glanced at Maria, a mixture of fear and gratitude in his eyes. "We must be careful. We cannot let them see us afraid." Maria nodded. "We will prepare. We must act normal just as we have been." The next few hours were spent quietly fortifying the farmhouse. They checked the doors and windows, ensuring they were secure, and Thomas quietly moved a few items to make the house appear more lived in. Maria prepared extra food, just in case they needed to stay hidden inside for longer than expected. They spoke in whispers, their hands busy with tasks but their minds alert to every sound outside. By mid-afternoon, the sound of hooves reached their ears. Maria's heart raced as she peered through the small window. A group of men had arrived at the edge of the property. They dismounted and began walking slowly toward the farmhouse, their movements deliberate, as if they expected resistance. Maria could see Thomas stiffen beside her. "Remember," she whispered, "we are married, we are together, do not show fear." Thomas nodded, swallowing hard. His face was tense, but he followed her instructions. They positioned themselves inside the farmhouse, sitting together at the table as if it were any other day. Maria kept her hands folded neatly in her lap, and Thomas spoke softly to her as they had rehearsed. The men knocked loudly on the door. Maria's heart jumped, but she forced herself to remain calm. Thomas opened the door slowly and the men stepped inside. Their expressions were hard, eyes scanning the room for any sign of weakness. "This is Thomas's home?" one of them asked gruffly. "Yes," Thomas replied steadily, "and this is my wife." He gestured toward Maria. The men looked at her, sizing her up, but Maria held her head high, speaking with quiet confidence. "I am his wife," she said firmly. "We live here together. There is nothing else to see." The leader of the group narrowed his eyes. "We heard you were alone," he said, his voice cold. "We want the land, Thomas. If we see you are vulnerable, we will take it." Thomas stepped slightly in front of Maria, placing himself as a shield. "You will not find me alone," he said calmly. "I am married and this is my wife. You have no right to threaten us." Maria could feel the tension in the room, but she also sensed that their act was working. The men looked unsure, their eyes flicking between Thomas and her. She realized that courage sometimes came in small gestures, the firmness of a voice, the calmness of a stance, and the confidence in one's eyes. After a tense moment, the leader spoke again, this time with a hint of hesitation. "Very well, we will leave for now. But remember, any sign of weakness and we will return." Thomas nodded, keeping his tone steady. "Understood. We will not give you a reason." The men left as quietly as they had come, mounting their horses and riding away down the dusty path. Maria let out a small breath she had been holding, and Thomas placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Thank you," he whispered. "You were incredible. I could not have done it without you." Maria shook her head. "We did it together. That is all that matters." After the men left, they sat in silence for a moment, letting the adrenaline fade. Maria realized that their bond had deepened. Fear had brought them together, but trust and mutual respect were keeping them connected. She felt a small sense of pride, not just for surviving, but for standing strong when it mattered most. The following days continued in a cautious rhythm. Maria and Thomas maintained their act as husband and wife, carefully tending the farm, speaking with neighbors, and keeping watch for any sign of the men returning. They learned to read subtle signs in the environment, the sound of hooves, the shift of clouds in the sky, or the sudden quiet of animals in the fields. One afternoon, as they worked together to repair a broken fence, Maria noticed something she had not before. Thomas was not just fearful, he was determined. Every action he took was careful and thoughtful, showing a quiet strength she had not expected. She realized that he had survived all these years through patience, hard work, and careful observation. He was brave, even if he did not always show it. As they worked side by side, their conversation drifted to lighter topics. They spoke of memories from their childhoods, of small joys, and of hopes for the future. Maria found herself smiling more, laughing quietly at Thomas's gentle humor. Despite the fear and danger surrounding them, they were finding moments of happiness, small but real, in each other's company. That evening, after another long day, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. The sky was painted with shades of orange and purple, and the wind carried the scent of fresh wheat. Maria felt a strange sense of calm, as if the beauty of the world outside could protect them, even briefly, from the dangers that lurked beyond the farmhouse. Thomas spoke softly. "Maria, I do not know how to repay you. You have risked so much for me." I am grateful beyond words." Maria shook her head. "We are helping each other. That is enough. Courage is not about rewards. It is about standing up when it is needed." The days that followed were filled with small victories. The men did not return immediately, and the farm slowly regained a sense of normalcy. Maria and Thomas continued their routines, tending to crops, repairing fences, and sharing quiet meals. Each day their bond grew stronger, built on trust, respect, and the shared experience of facing fear together. One morning, Maria awoke to a soft knock on the door. She opened it to find a neighbor, an older woman from the village, standing with a warm smile. "I see you are taking care of the farm," she said kindly. "It is good to have another helping hand around here." Maria smiled, feeling a small sense of pride. "Yes, we are managing. Thank you for checking on us." The neighbor nodded and left, and Maria closed the door with a quiet satisfaction. It was a small moment, but it reminded her that even in difficult times, there were people who noticed effort, courage, and kindness. That night, as they prepared for bed, Thomas and Maria sat together quietly. The farmhouse was calm, the threat of the men temporarily gone. Maria reflected on the past days, the fear, the preparation, the tense moments, and the small victories. She realized that life was unpredictable, but courage, determination, and trust could help people face even the most difficult challenges. Thomas glanced at her with a soft expression. "Maria, I feel safer because you are here. I have never felt this before. I trust you." Maria nodded, her heart warmed by the honesty in his voice. "And I trust you, Thomas. Together we can face anything." Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying a sense of quiet strength. The farmhouse, once just a simple shelter, had become a place of courage, resilience, and trust. Maria and Thomas had faced fear together and had emerged stronger. The days ahead were uncertain, but for now, they had survived, and their bond had grown stronger. And so, in that small farmhouse, two lonely people continued to navigate the delicate balance between fear and hope, danger and courage, pretense and reality. They had faced a true test, and in doing so, had found not just safety, but the beginnings of trust, friendship, and something more meaningful than either had expected. The days slowly grew longer and warmer as spring came to the small village. The wheat in Thomas's fields waved gently in the soft wind, and the birds returned to fill the air with their cheerful songs. For Maria and Thomas, life began to feel a little more normal, though the shadow of danger still lingered in the back of their minds. The men who had threatened Thomas had not returned yet, but they knew they could not afford to be careless. Each step, Each word, each movement needed to remain cautious and deliberate. Maria had grown more confident in her role. She could manage the farm with ease now, tending to the crops, the animals, and even organizing small repairs around the house. Thomas, too, had changed in subtle ways. The fear that had once clouded his every action had softened into quiet vigilance. Together, they had learned how to live under pressure, how to protect themselves, and how to support each other without needing to speak too much. Their partnership had grown strong. One morning, as the sun rose and painted the fields in golden light, Maria noticed Thomas standing by the edge of the wheat, looking thoughtful. She walked over to him, curious. "Is something wrong?" she asked gently. Thomas shook his head, a small smile appearing on his face. "No, not wrong, just thinking I have never had anyone like you by my side. Someone who trusts me, someone I can trust in return. I feel different now, safer, happier even." Maria felt warmth in her chest at his words. She realized she had felt the same. In the short weeks they had lived together, she had gone from fear and uncertainty to feeling secure and understood. She had found a companion in a world that often felt lonely. "You have changed me too, Thomas," she said quietly. "I thought life would only bring struggle and sorrow, but being here, helping you, I feel stronger than I have in years. I see hope again." Thomas turned to look at her fully, eyes bright with emotion. "Then we have given each other something precious. Not just survival, but trust, and perhaps even friendship." Their words hung in the air, gentle and honest, a quiet acknowledgement of the bond that had grown between them. It was not yet love, perhaps, but it was something equally powerful, a connection built on courage, trust, and shared experiences. The following weeks passed with a new rhythm. Maria and Thomas worked side by side from dawn to dusk. They harvested crops, repaired fences, and managed the animals, all while keeping up the pretense of being a married couple to any visitor who came near. The villagers began to accept them quietly, seeing them as a strong pair who managed their land well. No one questioned their presence, and the quiet farm began to feel like a safe haven again. One evening, as the sky turned a deep shade of orange, Maria and Thomas sat together on the porch after a long day of work. The air was warm, and the scent of fresh wheat and blooming flowers drifted gently around them. For the first time, they could sit without constant fear pressing on them. "I think the danger has passed," Thomas said softly. "They have not come back in weeks." "Perhaps they have given up." Maria nodded, a small smile on her face. "It seems so, and even if they return, we have learned to protect ourselves. We are stronger than before." Thomas reached for her hand, a simple gesture that carried more meaning than words could express. "Maria, I want to thank you not just for saving my life, but for staying with me, for trusting me, for being here." Maria squeezed his hand gently. "We saved each other, Thomas. That is all the thanks we need." The sun dipped below the horizon, and the first stars began to appear. The farm was quiet, peaceful, and full of life. Maria realized that the world, though often difficult and uncertain, could also bring moments of beauty and hope. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and responsibility, and she had come out stronger. She had learned that courage was not only in heroic acts, but also in steady, careful decisions, and in the willingness to trust others. As spring turned into summer, life on the farm settled into a comfortable routine. Maria and Thomas continued their work, but they also found time to enjoy the small joys of life. They shared quiet meals on the porch, laughed at small mistakes while tending the fields, and watched the children of nearby neighbors play in the meadows. The farm, once a place of fear, had become a home filled with life and hope. One afternoon, as they rested under the shade of an old oak tree, Maria spoke softly. "Thomas, I never imagined that pretending to be your wife would lead to this. I thought it would be only fear, only danger, but I have found friendship and trust, perhaps even more than that." Thomas looked at her, his eyes gentle. "I feel the same. What started as a pretense has become something real, something meaningful. I am grateful for every day you have been here." Maria felt a deep warmth in her heart. For the first time since her husband's death, she allowed herself to imagine a future that was not lonely. A future where she could face challenges with someone by her side, someone who respected her and trusted her, someone who had become more than just a companion in danger. Weeks passed, and the last signs of the men who had threatened Thomas faded completely. The farm was safe, their lives secure, and the days were filled with work, laughter, and quiet reflection. Maria and Thomas continued to grow closer, their bond deepening in ways that were gentle and natural. They shared stories of their pasts, their hopes for the future, and their dreams for the farm. Each conversation brought them closer, each shared task strengthened their partnership, and each quiet moment together reminded them of the value of trust and support. One evening, as they watched the sun set together, Thomas spoke quietly, almost hesitantly. "Maria, now that the danger has passed, I want you to know that you are more than a companion to me. You have become someone I care for deeply, someone I want in my life, not just as a friend, but as a part of my family. You have saved me not just from danger, but from loneliness." Maria's eyes softened. She realized that she had come to feel the same way. "Thomas, I care for you too. This life we have built together, this trust we share, it is more than I could have hoped for. I am glad I stayed, and I am glad we found each other." They sat in quiet reflection, holding hands, feeling the peace that had once seemed impossible. The farm was alive with the sounds of nature, the rustle of the wheat, the distant call of birds, and the gentle murmur of a nearby stream. The world felt vast, but for them it felt safe and full of promise. Over the following months, Maria and Thomas continued to nurture both the farm and their relationship. They worked side by side, planning improvements, tending the animals, and preparing for the coming seasons. Their connection grew steadily, rooted in shared experiences, mutual respect, and the understanding that true strength often came from kindness, patience, and trust. Maria's children began visiting more often, bringing laughter and joy to the farmhouse. Thomas welcomed them warmly, and the children, initially shy, soon felt at home in the company of someone who cared for them as much as Maria did. The farm became a place of life and love, not just survival. One sunny afternoon, as Maria and Thomas worked together to repair a section of the fence, Thomas paused and looked at her with a soft smile. "Maria, we have faced fear, danger, and uncertainty together, and through it all, we have found something precious. I am grateful for you every day." Maria smiled back, feeling a deep sense of peace. "And I am grateful for you, Thomas, for trusting me, for supporting me, and for being here. We have survived together, and now we can truly live together." As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the golden fields, Maria realized that life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. What had begun as a desperate act of survival had grown into a bond built on trust, courage, and quiet love. The fear that had once dominated their lives had faded, replaced by hope, partnership, and the promise of a future they could share. That evening they sat together on the porch, watching the stars appear one by one. The farm was quiet, peaceful, and full of life. Maria and Thomas had survived the danger that had threatened them, but more importantly, they had found each other. Their bond, forged in fear and strengthened through trust, had become something lasting. Maria rested her head on Thomas's shoulder, feeling the warmth and comfort of someone who had become a true companion. She realized that the most meaningful victories in life were not just about survival, but about connection, trust, and the courage to face challenges together. And so, in that small farmhouse surrounded by fields of wheat, two lonely people had found safety, companionship, and the beginnings of love. The story that had started with fear and desperation ended with hope, resilience, and the quiet joy of a life rebuilt together. Maria and Thomas had faced the shadows of the world and emerged stronger, wiser, and united, ready to face whatever the future might bring, side by side.